Tito Ortiz. At UFC 33 in September 2001, Tito Ortiz holds the light heavyweight belt and just as proudly holds the microphone, telling anyone who will listen that Ken Shamrock doesn't stand a chance. He escalates the rivalry with the infamous promise, "I'll make him my," which, while catchy, is also the kind of line that ages badly when you get knocked on your backside. By the time they meet at UFC 40 in November 2002, Shamrock lands a clean right hand in the opening round that drops Ortiz flat, giving the crowd a split second to imagine Tito's trash talk ending in a first-round meme. Ortiz survives, grinds out top control, and wins by doctor stoppage. But instead of cheers, he gets showered with boos for looking far less dominant than he sounded all year. Fans mocked the disconnect between his bold promises and his shaky first round, and Shamrock earned moral victory points just for nearly silencing the champ. Ortiz later admits that Shamrock hit harder than expected, though he stopped short of admitting who belonged to who after that first punch. This theme of overconfident talk crumbling under clinical striking leads right into Josh Koscheck, who finds out that Georges St. Pierre's jab is louder than any soundbite. Josh Koscheck. Josh Koscheck builds his reputation on The Ultimate Fighter 1 as the brash heel who constantly mocks Chris Lieben, only to get knocked out by him at UFC Fight Night in 2005. That early lesson doesn't stop him from doubling down on trash talk, especially before UFC 124 in December 2010, when he insists Georges St. Pierre's jab is weak and overhyped. The problem is that St. Pierre then proceeds to throw 356 strikes, land 240 of them, and break Koscheck's orbital bone almost entirely with that very jab. Koscheck spends 5 rounds eating the same punch he claimed couldn't hurt him, while GSP calmly racks up a unanimous decision in front of 23,000 fans in Montreal. The irony of mocking a jab and then being dismantled by one becomes one of MMA's most replayed examples of talk aging badly. Even Koscheck's post-fight interviews show the swelling as proof that words sometimes hurt less than jabs. His downfall sets the stage for Frank Mir, whose pre-fight talk against Brock Lesnar at UFC 100 collapses under the weight of ground and pound. Frank Mir, the former heavyweight champion with 13 UFC submission wins, spends months before UFC 100 reminding everyone that Brock Lesnar is a fraud who doesn't belong in the octagon. This trash talk feels bold considering Lesnar had already beaten Randy Couture for the belt and outweighed Mir by nearly 30 pounds on fight night. When they finally meet in July 2009, Lesnar takes him down early and unleashes a barrage of hammer fists, earning a TKO in the second round. The aftermath is almost more infamous than the fight, with Lesnar screaming at Mir's downed body and later yelling into the camera about Coors Light and his wife. The card hits 1.6 million buys, still the highest-selling UFC pay-per-view of its era, but Mir's pre-fight talk collapses under the weight of Lesnar's ground and pound. It's hard to call someone a fraud when they've just turned your head into a speed bag. Mir's humbling moment becomes one of the sport's most replayed examples of talk backfiring, leading neatly into Chael Sonnen, who also discovers what happens when Silva waits until the very last round to shut you up. Chael Sonnen, the self-proclaimed gangster from West Lynn, spends months before UFC 117 mocking Anderson Silva's English, his black belt, and basically anything short of his shoelaces. Then in August 2010, Sonnen shocks the world by dominating Silva for 4 full rounds, landing 320 strikes to Silva's 289, and making the champion look human for the first time in years. The upset feels locked in until 3:10 of round 5, when Silva throws up a triangle armbar from his back, and suddenly Sonnen's gangster act turns into desperate tapping. 4 rounds of trash talk and dominance vanish in the time it takes to order nachos at the concession stand. Fans laugh at the irony. The guy who swore jiu-jitsu was worthless gets choked out by it in front of millions. Sonnen later quips he won 24 minutes of that fight, which is basically the MMA version of saying you almost passed your exam. His spectacular undoing leads right into Rampage Jackson, who also finds out that calling someone a paper champ only makes it funnier when they leg kick your title away. Quinton Jackson. At UFC 86 in July 2008, Quinton Rampage Jackson walks in as the defending light heavyweight champion and spends the build-up dismissing Forrest Griffin as a paper champ. Odds makers back him with a minus 350 betting line, but the fight itself looks nothing like the script Rampage promised. Griffin chops away with 82 leg kicks, leaving Rampage limping around like he accidentally signed up for a calf-destroying spin class. After 5 rounds, the judges give Griffin a unanimous decision, and Rampage's belt goes home with the man he called paper. To make things worse, Rampage later finds himself fined for a reckless driving spree. Apparently, his gas tank ran out in the cage, but not on the freeway. Fans roast him for months, pointing out that if Griffin was paper, Rampage just got paper cut to death. Even Rampage later jokes that the leg kicks haunted him worse than some of his movie roles. His misfire and trash talk leads neatly to James Toney, who soon finds out that calling MMA easy gets you wrestled into the mat like a toddler in judo class. James Toney, the 72-fight boxing veteran and former multi-division world champion, strolls into MMA calling it easy, as if sprawling was just leaning backwards with better footwork. At UFC 118 in August 2010, he promises to knock out Randy Couture in under a minute, but instead spends that first minute trying to figure out why Couture is hugging his legs. Couture double-legs him like it's the world's least romantic prom dance, controls him on the mat, and taps him with an arm triangle at 3:19 of round 1. Toney pockets a cool $500,000 for the appearance, meaning he basically got paid 6 figures per grunt while stuck on his back. Fans joked he lasted longer at the buffet table than he did against Couture's wrestling. Even Toney's own corner looked like they wanted to throw in a white towel embroidered with "boxing only." His disastrous debut serves as comic relief in UFC history, and it paves the way for Chael Sonnen, whose silver tongue and endless insults actually kept him competitive, until Silva flipped the script in round 5. Chael versus Jones. Chael Sonnen spends the build-up to UFC 159 in April 2013, doing what he does best, taunting Jon Jones as their tough 17 coaching rivalry turns into a weekly comedy special. He calls Jones soft, questions his heart, and insists he'll walk away with the light heavyweight title, which is bold considering he was coming off a loss at middleweight. When fight night arrives, Jones takes him down immediately, drops sharp elbows, and finishes the TKO in just 1 round. To make things even more humiliating, Jones breaks his toe mid-fight, badly enough that it looks sideways, yet still dominates so thoroughly that nobody notices until after the stoppage. Sonnen, usually armed with 1,000 comebacks, settles for "I had nothing," which is probably the most honest thing he's ever said into a mic. Fans joked Sonnen spent more time talking on tough than fighting in the cage, which might be the first time trash talk actually counted as significant strikes. The whole episode feels like the UFC booked a TED Talk that accidentally ended with elbows. His collapse rolls directly into Ronda Rousey at UFC 193, where her own trash talk leads to one of the most shocking head kicks in MMA history. Ronda Rousey. At UFC 193 in November 2015, Ronda Rousey walks into Melbourne as the 12-0 bantamweight champion, already being promoted as the once-ever fighter by Dana White. She spends fight week throwing verbal jabs at Holly Holm, calling her a pretend nice girl, and insisting the former boxing champion won't survive under bright lights. Holm responds the best way possible, by dodging every punch, circling like she's playing tag, and then blasting Rousey with a head kick just 59 seconds into round 2. The knockout stuns 56,214 fans inside Etihad Stadium, the largest live UFC crowd ever, and instantly flips Rousey's dominance into a meme factory. Fans joke that Rousey didn't just lose her belt, she lost her Wi-Fi password too, since she vanished from media for months. Even Joe Rogan looked like someone had just unplugged his commentary headset when the kick landed. The shocking finish makes Rousey the poster child for trash talk backfiring, and it foreshadows Conor McGregor's own verbal slip when Nate Diaz drags him into deep water at UFC 196. McGregor versus Nate Diaz. At UFC 196 in March 2016, Conor McGregor arrives in Las Vegas predicting a first-round knockout, reminding everyone he just starched Jose Aldo in 13 seconds. Nate Diaz, stepping in on 11 days' notice at welterweight, looks more interested in burritos than press conferences but shrugs and says yes anyway. McGregor dominates early but throws power shots like he's trying to end global warming in one round, only to gas out by the second. Diaz lands 77 significant strikes, rocks him with a 1-2, and finishes with a rear naked choke at 4:12 of round 2. The moment Diaz drops the immortal line, "I'm not surprised, motherfuckers," McGregor's aura takes its first real hit. Fans joked Conor tapped faster than most people refresh Twitter after a fight announcement. Even McGregor's excuse, "inefficient with my energy," sounded like code for, "I didn't think Stockton cardio was real." That upset sets the stage for the rematch at UFC 202, where both men empty their gas tanks, but only Diaz still has Stockton slang left in the 5th round. Bisping versus Henderson. At UFC 100 in July 2009, Michael Bisping unleashes his trademark trash talk, mocking 38-year-old Dan Henderson as too old and too slow to compete. Henderson responds in round 2 by detonating his legendary H-bomb, a right hand so heavy it could have been registered as a weapon with the Nevada Commission. Bisping drops instantly, and Henderson follows with an infamous airborne punch just to make sure the point lands, literally and figuratively. The knockout becomes the poster child for highlight reels, played on loop at every UFC anniversary as if the UFC has a personal grudge against Bisping. Fans joke that Bisping talked so much trash that Henderson decided to recycle it with his fist. Even Bisping later laughed that he didn't see it coming, which is hilarious considering it was traveling at the speed of a bus. The backfire is so complete that years later, when Bisping finally defended his middleweight belt, fate paired him with Henderson again, almost like the matchmaking gods just wanted one more meme. Cody versus TJ. On The Ultimate Fighter 25 in 2017, Cody Garbrandt spends weeks berating TJ Dillashaw, calling him a snake, a traitor, and just about every other insult short of bad tipper. The animosity peaks at UFC 217 in November, when Garbrandt, then the undefeated bantamweight champion, floors Dillashaw at the end of round 1 and nearly closes the show. But Dillashaw survives, regroups, and in round 2 clips Garbrandt with a head kick followed by a right hook that seals the knockout. Dillashaw doesn't just win the belt back, he rubs salt in the wound by taunting Garbrandt as he lies stunned on the canvas. The moment flips all of Garbrandt's trash talk into instant boomerang material, with fans joking that he knocked TJ down only to help him measure the perfect comeback shot. Even Garbrandt later admitted he got reckless chasing the finish, which is the polite way of saying, "I walked into that punch face first." Their feud defines one of the most bitter title rivalries in bantamweight history, and it paved the way for Dillashaw's eventual downfall in 2019 after a failed drug test. Lewis versus Trash Talkers. At UFC 229 in October 2018, Alexander Volkov spends fight week poking fun at Derek Lewis's cardio, suggesting the heavyweight could barely last a treadmill session. The fight seems to prove him right as Volkov dominates for nearly 3 full rounds, landing clean strikes while Lewis looks exhausted and sluggish. But with just 11 seconds left, Lewis uncorks a thunderous right hand that erases Volkov's lead and turns certain victory into a highlight reel knockout. The comeback isn't just shocking, it instantly overshadows Volkov's pre-fight jokes, since no one's laughing when they're face down on the canvas. Lewis follows it up in the post-fight interview with his now legendary "My balls was hot" line, which arguably scored more retweets than the knockout itself. Even Volkov admitted later he lost focus, which is Russian for, "I forgot the giant man could still punch me." Ben Askren. At UFC 239 in July 2019, Ben Askren enters the octagon undefeated and dismissive, brushing off Jorge Masvidal as a journeyman unworthy of his wrestling pedigree. Within seconds, that confidence detonates as Masvidal sprints across the cage and lands a flying knee just 5 seconds into round 1, setting the record for fastest knockout in UFC history. Askren doesn't throw a single strike, instead becoming the face of one of the most viral MMA memes ever created. Fans joke that he spent more time in press conferences talking than he did actually fighting that night. Even Askren admitted later, with typical dry humor, that he should have zigged instead of zagged. His UFC run ends with a 1-2 record before retirement, leaving Masvidal's knee as the enduring image of his career. Colby Covington. At UFC 245 in December 2019, Colby Covington leans hard into his heel persona, branding Kamaru Usman Marty Fake Newsman and vowing to knock him out inside 2 rounds. The fight tells a different story, as Usman patiently breaks him down over 5 rounds, landing 175 significant strikes to Covington's 143 while mixing body shots and pressure. In round 5, Usman drops him twice and finishes with a TKO, all while Covington's jaw is literally fractured mid-fight. The irony is brutal. The man predicting an early knockout ends up fleeing from press conferences like he'd lost his Uber ride. Fans joke that his jaw had the same durability as his talking points. Even Covington later admitted he fought with a serious injury, which was a very polite way of saying, "My mouth finally couldn't keep up." His public collapse becomes one of the most high-profile examples of trash talk backfiring, setting the stage for future villains who underestimated champions built to punish nonstop insults. If you enjoyed this, I'm going to be posting a lot here. I would greatly appreciate it if you could subscribe. Thanks for watching.